Hello everyone, welcome to the YouTube channel of Get Set Law by IMS. I'm your verbal ability mentor Sanjana ma'am, and today I really wanted to come up with a topic which can actually help you, go for speedy reading in CLAT. And with CLAT and AIMLET being just a couple of days away, I think it's important that I come up with a video that can actually be a practical guide to my students here. All right, so at the outset, let's begin with today's video. All right. So we have to improve reading speed in CLAT. All right. Now, there are a couple of ways. The longer way was to actually practice, reading as much as possible. So every day, if you can read editorials, where to read editorials from, it depends entirely on you. I think if you've already prepared well for the exam, you know that you can take recourse to newspaper editorials. You could also look up some websites online. You could read Aeon essays. You could read articles from theguardian.com. Right? You can also solve passages on a daily basis. So, like I said, 4-5 articles daily. Word limit is something that I've mentioned here because it's generally helpful to read a passage of this length, right? Because, above this, CLAT will never ask a passage. And as it is, the passages asked in CLAT are also for very small, word limit as well. 250, 300 words, 400, 450, not beyond it. So even for passages that are worded at this limit, I would say take no more than 7 minutes to read it. It's actually possible. This happens because you read that often, right? Now, one important guidance. Whenever you're being presented with a reading comprehension passage or a passage for logical reasoning in CLAT, you're not always supposed to read the passage word for word. According to me, passages that need to be read verbatim are, let's just say, narrative passages which are, in a story-like format, passages on literature, because, you cannot actually skim through the information. I don't feel that the information is redundant or repetitive. But for other passages, let's just say it's a random editorial taken from, let's say, the Indian Express or the Hindu. Are you supposed to read it throughout? Not really. Even if you go and watch my videos on decoding editorials, I will always tell everybody to never read the entire passage. You can choose to skip some information and only come back and read it whenever there is a question based on that information. Right? Second thing, always focus on the introduction of the paragraph or the passage and the conclusion, because our idea is whenever we read something and when we're done reading, we should know that we have understood the passage. When do we understand the passage? When we understand what is, the most important topic mentioned in the passage, which is actually the main idea. So our goal is always to understand the main idea. Sometimes one passage cannot convey the main idea very uniformly. So you don't really have to wait to understand the main idea. So sometimes it's okay if a passage doesn't have one uniform overarching main idea. But for the most part, mostly, you have to strive to understand the main idea, because only then you feel a little more confident in solving the questions, right? So focus on the introduction and the conclusion. A lot of times, the main idea can be understood from the conclusion only, right? Then, if a complex sentence is confusing at first, don't dwell on it. Multiple times it happens, and it will happen during the exam also. You never know. There are some statements which you do not know what they imply, what they mean. Maybe it might contain a lot of floral words, difficult words in vocab, right? So do you really have to wait for 2 minutes to, sort of decode the entire statement, make sense of it, and then get to solving the questions? No, that's not how, attempting a competitive exam works. Right? So whenever you feel that a certain sentence is really complicated or complex, it's okay. I would suggest imagine as if this sentence doesn't exist, right? And that it doesn't create any impact on the understanding of the passage. You can just read it when you have a question on it. But if there is no question, no point wasting time on reading something and not able to understand. And the last point is, instead, what you can do is focus on the parts that are clear and understandable. This is what I will do as a mentor also. There are some passages, some genres which I'm not particularly fond of or familiar with. But that doesn't mean that I'll give up and I'll have my own assumptions about the passage being very difficult, that I'm not understanding anything. It doesn't really work like that. What I try to do is still, I keep my calm and I just focus on whatever little I'm able to understand. So at least I feel that I know something about the passage. And knowing something about the passage is also a good start to being able to solve the questions confidently. So these are the points. The umbrella rule, always read as much as possible, because the more you read, the better you'll become at reading speed. Now, when you read, another very important point. Read not because I'm asking you to. Read not because you simply think that you read and speed will automatically follow suit. No. Read because you also want to understand the passage within the set time of 5 minutes or 4 minutes, right? I'm not talking about speedy reading in the sense how to read speedily. That you can do any day. I'm also talking about speedy reading in the sense that you also need to understand what you're reading, right? Which is why you don't have to read every passage word for word. And how will you know if there's a certain passage you have to read entirely or a certain passage you can cherry pick information from? That comes with practice only. The more you practice, you can automatically, you can sometimes intuitively also tell this is a passage that does not warrant reading verbatim, right? Introduction, conclusion, and for complicated sentences, chuck them. Not always, but mostly, right? And just focus on whatever little you're able to read. Now, what I've tried to do here is I have actually brought a passage here, okay? And I'm going to tell you that for a lay person, how can we solve it quickly, speedily at that? So, onto the next screen. This is a passage here, all right? Okay. So this passage, what I'm going to do is, my first point here is that I am able to notice the word Boris Johnson. The fact that he announces resignation as what? British Prime Minister, right? Because several controversies were there. This is speedy reading. Did I read the entire statement? Absolutely not. I'm only focusing on keywords. Now, Liz Truss, she has been named as successor. So she's a new Prime Minister, right? She served initially as a foreign minister under Johnson. That's it. And she outplayed former finance minister Rishi Sunak. That's it. Okay. Now, always focus on, this will really help you with speedy reading or at least reading the important parts. Always focus on, however, yet, but, even, although, despite and in spite of, because these transition words, they actually introduce contrasting statements. So it says, however, she won't get much time to celebrate her win or victory as Britain is embedded in a cost of living crisis. Okay, so however, she doesn't have a lot of time because Britain is already surrounded with a lot of problems, right? Problems are cost of living crisis, long recession, spiraling inflation. I'm not looking at the number here. I will only look at the number when there's a question on it, right? Now, her functioning as a new Prime Minister will come under intense scrutiny right from day one, right? Because she has promised to unveil a plan within a week, right? Which plan? What is the objective of the plan? To deal with the rising energy bills, right? Secure future fuel supplies, right? Now, direct support to households. Now, this information is important, but I'm reading it speedily, right? Because I'm focusing on keywords. Tax cuts are high, right? On her to-do list. Now, how these steps will reduce inflation is a moot point. That's okay. You don't have to read this part, right? Now, Britain's economic woes. Again, Britain is actually suffering from economic problems. They can be understood from the fact, okay, some information is given with respect to India, that India itself has overtaken it to become the world's 5th largest economy. So even India has left it behind in becoming the world's 5th largest economy, right? In fact, India's lead over the UK is expected to even become stronger in the next few years, right? Now, there is also some bright side, some positive point mentioned, that Britain's debt to gross domestic product ratio is lower than that of other group of 7 nations except Germany. Just a factual information, okay? I'll fast forward to the remaining part of the passage. This might give the Truss government some leverage, some leeway to help out millions of cash-strapped people again. The primary goal, it seems, till the time she is actually functioning as a prime minister, is to sort of tackle the economic woes that Britain is beset with, right? Responsible use of public finances is also important. It will count in the long run. Now, this is important again. What Britain direly needs is a stable, sincere, and strong leadership, right? Something which wasn't present during Johnson's scandal-tainted tenure. Okay, so when Johnson was reigning as the Britain Prime Minister, there wasn't stable, sincere, strong leadership. So this is what Britain needs direly, right? Now, because the UK has had enough of a PM who remained in the news mostly for the wrong reasons. So again, we have expectations from the Truss government, as has been voiced by the author, that she would have to adopt a no-nonsense approach to running the government, right? Now, she will also be under pressure to scale down Britain's involvement in the Ukraine-Russia conflict so that domestic problems are tackled on priority. So domestic problems should be, I would say, prioritized. Okay, that's it. All right. Now, New Delhi, again, fast forward to India. New Delhi has much to look forward to during this term, starting with India-Britain Free Trade Agreement, which seems on course to meet its October deadline. An effective implementation of the Defence Cooperation Pact is also critical for India. So towards the end, we're also focusing on how this government here can affect India and Britain relations, right? That's it. Okay, which is India-Britain Free Trade Agreements and the Defence Cooperation Pact. Overall, we're talking about how Boris Johnson is no longer the Prime Minister, how Liz Truss is the new Prime Minister, and the fact that her functioning is now going to be even more, intensely scrutinized because Britain in itself is suffering from a lot of economic problems. So there's a lot on her to take care of it, right? Rest of the information, maybe I'm not able to recall, but that's okay. I'm confident that I've understood the passage. I didn't spend some 3-4 minutes reading it, thinking, okay, this is what the main idea could be. No. Yeah, I did took longer because I had to explain to you. But in all likelihood, if I were to read it alone, in my mind, I would just solve this within 1.5 minutes. Believe me, students, it's actually possible. So we'll focus on the questions now. What is the primary purpose of the passage? All right. We are talking about Liz Truss and how her functioning is, there's a need for us to scrutinize her functioning because Britain is beset with a lot of problems. This is what I have in my mind as a skeleton idea. Are we going to highlight, is the primary purpose to highlight the incompetence of Boris Johnson? It's just a very peripheral idea given in the last part, okay? To show that Britain actually needs a stable, secure, strong leadership, unlike the leadership displayed by Boris Johnson. So A is out. To explain the dire financial condition of Britain, if that was the case, we wouldn't actually focus on Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, right? This is out. To touch upon the challenges, right? The fact that she's under scrutiny because Britain itself is beset with a lot of problems and the challenges facing Britain's new Prime Minister. The best option choice is C. How easy it was to answer this. Are we here to talk about the strong ties between Britain and India? These are all really peripheral ideas. I don't know how important it is to have mentioned India here. Perhaps you want a question on it. But if you remove it, it doesn't really impact your understanding of the passage here. So D is wrong, okay? The best idea, the primary purpose as to why we have written the passage in the first place is C. Focus on the next question. Which of the following can be inferred from the passage? Boris Johnson provided Britain with much needed leadership. There. This is actually wrong. He didn't, which is why Britain actually direly needs a stable, strong, secure leadership. India's economy is bigger than Britain's. All right? And this is actually the best option choice because India has led behind British, right? The Britain to become the world's 5th largest economy. And this indirectly does tell us that India's economy is bigger than that of Britain. C says Rishi Sunak was a foreign minister of Britain. Where is it mentioned? Nowhere. Cancel it, right? Britain's debt to GDP ratio is quite pure. Actually, this is wrong. This was expressed as a positive side. This is a bright side, right? So D is wrong. The best inference is B. Again, this is all of the keywords that I had highlighted. Based on that alone, you can mark B. And the previous question also you can solve correctly, right? So that's it. These were the 2 questions. I just wanted to show you that you could just read the passage in 1 minute, skim through it, focus on the highlighted aspects and solve the 2 questions because the way you read, you should also be able to retain and understand information. This happens when you also have something called focused reading. So that's it, students. I hope you've understood the entire insights. If you found this helpful, let us know in the comment section. And thank you so much, everyone. Whenever you have a doubt, you feel free to reach out to us, connect with any of the mentors from the Get Set, live online team. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.